The Center for Procurement Excellence is a nonprofit member organization with a mission of educating, promoting, and advocating for better RFP processes. Join CPE today and make your RFPs faster and more transparent. Membership also includes discounts to all of our training and networking events. CPE hosts a variety of virtual and in-person networking and training events throughout the year. Visit our website to get signed up. CPE Speakers Bureau is available for your regional and national meetings and professional conferences. Contact us to learn more.
Welcome to Ask the RFP Doctor, CPE's monthly web series where we discuss the latest best practices in procurement and supply chain management.
Okay, so today's teaching moment, 7 deadly marketing phrases. Today's focus here is really about marketing. And when we think about marketing, that likely comes up with ideas of boilerplate, filler, not very project specific. Basically it all looks the same, right? When we think about marketing and the frustrations we have with that, these are commonly what it turns out to. Because at the end of the day here, we would probably all agree that when we think of marketing, it's typically not very useful information, right? So when you think about marketing versus expertise, because marketing is that boilerplate information, it's not project specific. Whereas expertise here is very precise to the project we're looking at, right on target, and explains what the vendor will tackle under scope, right? There's a difference between everything's going to be amazing versus here's how we're going to get to amazing. And that's what expertise is. How do we actually get that done? So let's go through our 7 topics here, our 7 phrases, and walk through each one of these. So the first one, we have X number of years of experience, right? The thing with that here is anyone can say this, right? Seriously, anyone can say this. Have you seen, you especially see this in IT and software vendors, proposals, is they typically talk about things in terms of person years. Has anybody seen that before? We have 54 person years of experience. The reason why they do that is because they're brand new and they don't actually have a long history of being in business, right? But that's what they trained them to say. So that's what we see in the proposals. And this kind of stuff here, boo, not good, right? Everybody looks the same when I think about that, right? So if everybody can say this, that we all have X number of years experience, what value does that bring to us? If you think about the key principles of CP, what we advocate for is using evaluation criteria that allows us as an evaluator or as a procurement professional is to be able to differentiate between experts and non-experts, right? So when I see this phrase, here's what I think. So what, right? If somebody has 50 years of experience, I'm going to know what kind of experience that is, right? Because if, 105 years versus 75 years, which is better, right? Yeah, I mean, if we think about what happened 50 years ago, I think at the end of the day, we're looking at what is experienced here today, and how's that relevant to us, right? This book here, All My Friends Are Dead, is kind of a goofy book, but if you can buy plants, they have to grow, right? And if you've done it for a long time, it's hard to understand what we're actually going on here with this, right? So we have X number of years of experience. The second one is we're highly experienced in insert industry buzzword, right? If you think about whether it's lean, whether it's just-in-time, BIM, lean, sustainability, innovation, all these current buzzwords, agile that you might be seeing, how does this actually apply to them delivering the project, right? It's like fast fashion, right? It's kind of like the previous phrase. Anyone can say it because of the trending topic of the day. But even worse here is that when you think about procurement, what this ends up being is really a steaming pile of garbage, right? Because it doesn't tell us anything as to what's actually going on here at the end of the day, right? When the newest buzzword comes out, they'll just swap that out with something else here. And again, this perpetuates the idea that there's nothing actually available for us to distinguish what's going on with our projects, right? Number 3 here, we're really flying through these here today, folks. Number 3 here is our company values are insert some sort of lofty company mission statement. We have a total team approach, things are amazing. A mission statement does not correlate to high performance, right? Seeing company values in proposals kind of makes me laugh, right? Because you see them, it doesn't help us out understand what's going on, and it really doesn't look at that. If you think about a general contractor and subcontractor perhaps pursuing each other, look at their mission statements, right? Because they all say we're collaborative, we work together, but at the end of the day here, we see lawsuits and frustrations, and we don't like that, right? Being unique is not necessarily a good thing, right? Because if they don't actually know what's in their proposal and they have these lofty statements, that's not valuable to us as evaluators, right? And the next time you hear about a lawsuit or something else that's going on here is do yourself and read the mission statement of the companies that are being proposed here, right? Just because you see innovation or forward thinking doesn't actually mean that we're like that, right? In the end, these phrases are just fluff. They're used to fill space because the idea of putting actual thoughtful content into the proposal it takes effort, right? And we prefer to just procrastinate and not actually get that done. Because you know the rule, in a pinch, use a motivational phrase or quote because you have to fill the pages, right? That's why we see so much marketing fluff or material that really doesn't help us distinguish what's going on in our proposals. Okay, number 4 here. We use the best pre-qualified list of subs, suppliers, manufacturers, whatever, right? We use the best, nothing but the best for us, because at the end of the day here, though, when you think about this statement, and really think about this, is how does this help us distinguish between who knows what they're doing and not, right? It all sounds insane, and guess what? Everybody says this as well. It's an example of an unsubstantiated claim that we don't know how the performance is actually going to be. There's no performance information behind that to tell us, here's what's going to happen, right? If you're going to have a statement, and for vendors that might see this video someday, is make sure to emphasize, here's how we know we can do our project. Here's the number of times we've done it. Here's the performance on those projects. And here's how we're confident that we can actually do things. It's difficult to do that, but nobody does it. And when you do have this performance information, it makes it easier for an evaluator to know, okay, they've actually done this before. I have higher confidence in what they're telling us as a vendor. All right, number 5 here. Number 5, deadly marketing phrase. Our people are our greatest asset, right? So when you think about this one here, this is really another smokescreen. Avoids calling to attention the fact that the vendor at the time of proposal submission really has no idea who's going to be on the project, right? When I see this phrase, this is commonly what I think is actually going on here, right? So again, they'll figure it out later. We don't know who's going to happen, but again, make sure you look at this. Our RFP training course actually goes into a lot of detail about how do we look at people, how do we evaluate different things. So if you haven't been in that course, be sure to check it out. I think we'll have one coming up in a few months, but be sure to look in that in more detail. Okay, here's another one, number 6 here. Might be a little bit controversial, but just hear me out on this one. Safety is our number 1 priority. Now I'm saying that's a deadly marketing phrase, right? The reason why I say this is that not because safety is not important, but because everybody says that. And if everybody is saying the same thing here, it limits our ability as an evaluator to actually determine what's going to happen. If you look at safety plans, especially for an evaluator that is not a technical expert in construction, for example, their ability to distinguish what a good plan is versus a bad plan is very limited. And yet we all acknowledge that safety is certainly important here, but it's not a good way to distinguish, what's going on. So vendors, and I think the reason why this happens is that vendors love to tell us what we think we want to hear as an owner. They think it gains them points. But unfortunately, what I've seen is that clients owners set themselves up for this by overemphasizing something that in reality is not important, i.e. safety, right? Safety is important, but if we put too much emphasis on it, well, guess what? That's what the vendors are going to respond us with, is because we talked about it so much, well, that must be important, therefore I'll talk about that. If the vendor is an expert, then they'll know what's important to the project and to the client, and we'll talk about that. And that's why as an owner, as a buyer of these services here, let the vendors tell us what's important. I had a project once where the owner, the procurement person said, well, this particular part of the scope is really important to us, and I want to make sure that they address this in their risk plans. And I advocated against that. I was like, that might be true here, but again, we're trying to hire expert vendors that know what they're doing. And if this expert vendor knows your project and see that this is a risk, then yes, they'll talk about it. But there frankly might be other things that you're not even aware of that we'd rather have them dedicate their focus on, and tell us, what's actually important here. See, by not telling the vendors what to write in their proposals or what to focus on, that's another way to distinguish who knows what they're talking about, right? So avoid telling them too much about, here's what we want you to talk about in your proposals. And lastly, number 7, this is kind of the biggest one, is we will work with the client to whatever. We will meet with the client, we will collaborate with the client, and so on and so forth, right? So if you see this, I call this the kiss of death, right? Because what this means here is this is the worst thing that the vendor can say, because it doesn't actually have a plan. It's saying, well, we'll work with you when a problem comes up, we'll figure it out together, and essentially is kind of transferring the risk to us as a buyer of these services. So when you see this, red alert status, this is really dangerous. When you see this, like I said, folks, today's gonna be a fun webinar. If you see this, you got to run away. That's no ordinary proposal. Just keep that in mind, folks, right? The reason why this is a concern is that when you see phrases like, we will work with you to whatever, is there's a couple of reasons. And I really came up with 3 ideas for why somebody might say this. The first one is perhaps the most charitable one, is that they simply don't have a plan. They'll figure it out later, it'll be fine, but at the time of proposal submission, if a certain condition comes up, they don't know what they're going to do about it. They'll figure it out when it does come up, but as of now, they don't have a plan in place. The second reason why somebody might write this is maybe truly they have no idea. They haven't even thought about it, right? And that's certainly unsettling. And perhaps most concerning here, number 3 reason, is that the vendor is trying to transfer risk back to the client. You're not hiring vendors to come to us with problems, say, well, let's work together to figure this out. What I want is a vendor that knows what they're doing, say, here's the situation, here's the options, here's our plan to mitigate that, here's the cost for each one of these, and here's our recommendation. You want your vendors to come to you proactively identifying, here's the problems that we see, here's how we're going to minimize those issues. The worst thing you want a vendor to do is to come to you say, hey, we had this problem come up. What do you think we should do about it? And the reason why is because as soon as you answer that question of, here's what I think you should do, guess who owns the risk now? You as a buyer, the person that told them what to do, now owns that risk. The best thing to say is that when somebody does come and you say, hey, what do you think we should do about this? Is, I don't know, you tell me. Or what do you recommend? We're going to avoid taking on the risk here, because at the end of the day here, we're trying to use the expertise of the people we're hiring. So in summary here, these are the 7 deadly marketing phrases. Again, if you see these, run. If you're talking to your vendors about how to put together a better proposal, then talk to them about these 7 things here, because we have seen this time and again here that what works well and what doesn't work well. Now, another resource that you might want to take a look at here is the Simplar Foundation news log. So I'll have the link here in a second, and maybe Jeff, you can kind of drop that into the chat box here. But this news log has lots of different topics about things related to procurement, to construction, to facility management. It is focused on the construction side of things, but the content and the ideas behind it are extremely applicable across all business sectors. One of the news postings we had on there was actually written by a colleague of mine, Brian Mines. And what we talked about is we went through the 7 phrases here, but we also looked at the research behind it. And in fact, what we did on this particular research study is that we looked at, I think it's close to 300 proposals. And we looked at the correlating factors between what gets high evaluation scores and what's inside of those proposal contents. And we found is that in general, when people use these 7 phrases, they tend to have much lower scores compared to vendors that don't do that. So check it out. Jeff will drop that in the chat box, but make sure you take a look at that, because there's a lot of really valuable, useful information there that might be relevant to us all.
This has been Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence.